The air smelled like expensive perfume and champagne, the kind Clara always loved. Something French, no doubt, the bottle probably a gift from some sycophant who thought her generosity was real. The dock was strung with fairy lights, glowing against the dusk like fireflies trapped in glass. Laughter spilled across the water, bright and careless. Her laughter, of course, always hers. I stood just beyond the tree line, hidden in the shadows where no one would think to look for me. Not that they ever did. From here, I could see it all. The sleek black cars lining the driveway, the caterers in crisp white uniforms, ferrying trays of oysters and caviar, the guests draped in silk and smug satisfaction. And Clara, radiant in a cream-coloured dress, her arm looped through her fiancé's like she'd already won some grand prize. My fingers curled into fists. The wood of the dock, my dock, legally half mine, stolen with a flick of a pen, was smooth under her ridiculous heels. She'd thrown this party to celebrate their engagement right here on the property she'd swindled me out of. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd always had a flair for the dramatic, my sister. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne flutes, and I almost laughed. I remembered the last time I'd been here, the day after Grandad's funeral. Clara had handed me a stack of papers, her voice honey-sweet. "Just some formalities," she'd said. "Sign here, here, and here." I'd been too numb with grief to question it, too trusting. By the time I realised what she'd done, that she'd forged my signature on a deed transfer, that she'd paid off the lawyers, that she'd stolen what was mine, it was too late. The house, the land, the dock where we'd spent summers as kids, all of it was hers now, at least on paper. A burst of applause rose from the crowd. Clara was smiling, lifting her glass in a toast, her diamond ring catching the light. Someone snapped a photo. I wondered if they'd noticed me in the background when they developed it. A ghost at the edge of the frame, watching. Waiting. I could have stormed in. Could have made a scene, screamed, demanded justice. But what good would it do? The law was on her side. Our parents were on her side. The whole damn world was on her side. So I did the only thing left to me. I turned and walked away, not in defeat, in strategy. Because if Clara thought this was the end, she was even stupider than I'd thought, and I never underestimated her twice. The first time I understood I was second best, I was 7 years old. It was Clara's 10th birthday, and the house was a whirlwind of pink balloons and sugar-frosted cupcakes. Mom had spent weeks planning, handmade invitations, a magician, even a miniature pony Clara could ride in the backyard. I remember pressing my nose against the window, watching the other kids arrive in their party dresses, their laughter bubbling through the glass like something I wasn't allowed to touch. No one noticed when I crept into the kitchen, drawn by the smell of chocolate. The cake sat on the counter, pristine, crowned with Clara's name in looping cursive. My finger hovered over the icing, trembling. Just one taste. That's all I wanted. Then, Mum's voice sliced through the air. "What are you doing?" Her hand clamped around my wrist, yanking me back. "This is Clara's day. Don't ruin it." The words stung, but the look in her eyes was worse, like I was an intruder in my own home. Clara, of course, got away with everything. When she accidentally broke Grandad's antique vase, it was charming. When she lied about finishing her homework, it was resourceful. Even the teachers adored her. Her golden curls and practiced smile made sure of that. Meanwhile, I buried myself in books, in quiet achievements, science fairs, math competitions, hoping someone would glance my way. Grandad did. He'd slip me butterscotch candies under the table and whisper, "You're the sharp one, don't let them dull you." But he was the only one. The night before he died, he squeezed my hand and said, "The lake house is yours too. Promise me you'll fight for it." I should have known Clara was already 10 steps ahead. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and dust. the kind of stale air that clung to bad news. We sat in stiff-backed chairs, Mum dabbing her eyes, Dad staring at the wall, Clara perfectly composed in her black dress, the picture of grief. I kept my hands folded tight, nails biting into my palms. When the lawyer cleared his throat, I knew before he spoke. To my granddaughters, he read, voice dry as the paperwork in front of him. I leave the lake house in equal shares. A beat of silence. Then Clara's sharp inhale. I didn't look at her, but I felt it, the moment her mourning turned to calculation. Mum squeezed Clara's shoulder first. Dad murmured something about responsibility and legacy, his eyes sliding right past me. Clara recovered fastest, of course. She reached for my hand, her grip just shy of too tight. We'll take care of it together, she said, all sweetness. I should have pulled away. Instead, I nodded, already tasting the lie. The papers sat between us, innocent as a loaded gun. 3 weeks after the will reading, Clara showed up at my apartment with a stack of documents and a bottle of wine. She breezed in like she owned the place, which, given recent events, she probably thought she eventually would. Paperwork, she sighed, dropping the folder on my kitchen counter with a dramatic flourish. So tedious, but the lawyer says we need to finalise everything. I eyed the papers warily. The top sheet swam with legal jargon, dense paragraphs swimming in margins. My name appeared in bold in several places. Clara popped the cork on the wine, something expensive no doubt, and filled 2 glasses without asking. It's just formalities, she said, pushing one toward me. Signatures, mostly. Grandad would want this handled properly. That was her favourite trick, invoking his name like a spell, knowing I couldn't refuse. I should have read every line, should have called my own lawyer. But the wine was smooth and Clara kept talking, about the house, about our childhood, about how much she missed him, until the words blurred together with the ink. Here, she said, flipping pages with manicured fingers. And here, initial this one. Her pen hovered over the spots like a wasp deciding where to sting. I signed where she pointed. The scratch of the pen sounded too loud in the quiet apartment. When I got to the last page, something prickled at the back of my neck. The document looked different. Thicker paper, different letterhead. Clara saw me hesitate. Oh, that's just the county filing copy, she said, waving a hand. Standard stuff? Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. A real one, sharp and satisfied. That should have been my warning. The pen felt heavy in my hand. Don't be dramatic, Clara murmured when I paused too long. It's just paperwork. I signed. She gathered the documents with practiced efficiency, tucking them away before I could ask questions. The wine bottle was empty now. Clara checked her watch, an expensive flick of her wrist, and stood. Thanks for handling this, she said, already heading for the door. I'll take care of everything else. The click of the latch echoed like a gunshot. It took me 3 days to realise what I'd done. By then, the deed transfer was recorded, the lawyers paid, and Clara was already hosting her first party on my dock. The worst part, she didn't even hide it. When I called furious, she just laughed. Should have read the fine print, little sister. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, the truth settling in my bones. I hadn't just lost the house. I'd been played. The lawyer's office was colder than I remembered. I sat across from Mr. Holloway, his polished mahogany desk between us like a barrier. His fingers steepled under his chin, mouth pressed into a thin line. The same expression he'd worn at Grandad's funeral. I'm sorry, he said, not sounding sorry at all. The documents are legally binding. Your signature is clear. I wanted to scream. Instead, I dug my nails into my thighs and forced my voice steady. She forged it. Holloway sighed, sliding a copy of the deed toward me. Without proof, there's nothing to be done. The paper might as well have been a knife. There it was, my loopy, careless signature, right beside Clara's elegant flourish. I'd signed it myself, drunk on her wine and her lies. Outside, rain streaked the windows, distorting the city into a watercolour of grey. I thought of the lake house, my lake house, where Clara was probably redecorating, erasing every trace of me. "You could contest it," Holloway offered half-heartedly, "but with your sister's connections—" He didn't need to finish. Clara had married into money, charmed every judge at the country club. I had nothing but fury and a bank account still grieving Grandad's death. I stood abruptly, chair screeching. Holloway blinked up at me. "Miss, keep your advice." The elevator ride down was suffocating. Somewhere between the 12th floor and the lobby, something in me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, irrevocable shift. I walked straight past the taxi stand, past the bus stop, letting the rain soak through my coat. People hurried by, umbrellas angled against the downpour, but I didn't care. The cold felt fitting. At the park, I stopped under a skeletal oak, its bare branches clawing at the sky. My phone buzzed. Clara, no doubt. I didn't check. Instead, I stared at my reflection in a rain puddle, my face fractured by ripples. This was the moment. The crossroads. I could fight. Spend years in court, bankrupt myself trying to reclaim what was mine. Let Clara win by default as she drained me dry. Or I could disappear. Not in defeat, in reinvention. A truck rumbled by, its headlights cutting through the gloom. In that sudden brightness, I made my choice. I turned off my phone, tossed it into the storm drain, and walked away from everything. Let Clara have her victory. I'd be back for the war. The city didn't care about my story. That was the first thing I learned. No one looked twice at the woman in thrift store blazers hauling a single suitcase into a studio apartment above a laundromat. The walls smelled like detergent and mildew. The floorboards creaked like old bones, and the shower only ran cold. But it was mine. Paid for in cash, under a name no one would recognise. I took the first job that wouldn't ask questions. Data entry at a real estate office where the computers still hummed with Windows 95. My fingers memorised the rhythm of keystrokes while my eyes absorbed everything. Deed transfers, zoning laws, the way brokers' smiles never reached their eyes. At lunch, I read finance books from the library, underlining passages until the pages warped from coffee spills. The other temps whispered about me. Quiet girl, no photos on her desk, always watching, let them talk. Silence was my armour now. By month 3, I'd memorised every foreclosure listing in the county. By month 6, I knew which ones were undervalued. The day I found the brick duplex on Elm Street, roof sagging, pipes frozen, priced lower than a used car, I emptied my savings account without blinking. The loan officer frowned at my paperwork. "You don't have a co-signer." I slid Grandad's pocket watch across the table, the one Clara didn't know existed. "Collateral?" That night, I slept on the duplex's warped hardwood floor, listening to rats scuttle in the walls. Dawn painted the water stains gold as I pried up rotted baseboards with a crowbar. Blisters burst on my palms, but I didn't stop. Every swing of the hammer was a middle finger to everyone who thought I'd vanish quietly. Contractors quoted prices that would have bankrupted me, so I became my own crew. YouTube taught me plumbing. Library books explained electrical wiring. The hardware store clerk started calling me boss when I came in weekly for supplies, my arms streaked with drywall dust. 8 months later, the duplex gleamed. Hardwood refinished, walls the colour of summer wheat, a kitchen backsplash. I tiled myself in a herringbone pattern. The first tenants signed their lease with a family of 4 and a golden retriever. Their deposit covered my next down payment. Clara's Instagram popped up once on a coffee shop computer, her posing on the lake house dock, champagne flute raised. I closed the tab and bought a foreclosure auction catalogue. Let her play heiress. I was building an empire from scrap. The condemned building on Morrison Street should have scared me. Plaster rained from the ceiling in chalky flakes when I stepped inside. The previous owner had gutted the plumbing for scrap metal, leaving gaping holes in the walls like missing teeth. A faded eviction notice fluttered from the front door, whispering warnings in the draft. But all I saw were the bones, thick crown moulding under decades of grime, original hardwood buried beneath rotting carpet, and that view of the river just visible through grimy bay windows. The bank wanted it off their books so badly they accepted my lowball offer without countering. I spent my first night there camped on the warped floorboards, flashlight propped on a paint can as I sketched layouts in a notebook. The neighbourhood kids threw rocks at the windows after dark, their laughter floating through broken panes. I let them. They'd be the first to notice when this place stopped being a ruin. 3 dumpsters filled with debris later, I found the marble fireplace hidden behind a drywall. Its carved cherubs smiled at me like co-conspirators. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a flip. This was my proof. Contractors refused to work on a death trap, so I became my own electrician, rewiring circuits until my hands trembled from near misses with live wires. The plumbing took 3 attempts to pass inspection. When the appraiser finally walked through, his eyebrows climbed higher with each room. The sold sign went up 6 days later. The profit bought me 2 more properties. That night, I drove past the lake house for the first time since leaving. Lights blazed from every window, music pulsing through the trees. I didn't stop. Let Clara have her parties. I was playing a longer game. Money, I discovered, was just a tool, like a crowbar or a blueprint. The duplex profits became a 4-unit apartment building. Then a derelict motel I converted into microlofts for artists. By year 3, my company's logo, a simple keyhole design, was stamped on renovation projects across 3 counties. I hired people smarter than me, a contractor who could spot load-bearing walls by knocking, a finance whiz who turned tax loopholes into profit streams. Tech startups caught my eye next. Risky bets on unproven apps became strategic acquisitions when I noticed their founders had something Clara never did: vision beyond their own reflection. My silent partnerships grew into board seats, then controlling interests. The business magazines called me ruthless in their profiles. They photographed me in black blazers against glass office backdrops, never guessing the look was inspired by watching lawyers dismiss Grandad's will. My signature moved from loan documents to merger agreements, the pen heavier with each one. Meanwhile, Clara's life made tabloid headlines without my help. Her husband's hedge fund collapsed. The lake house needed a new roof. She sold her jewellery collection at auction, the gossip columns clucking over her humbling downsizing. I didn't smile when I read the articles. I circled the auction dates in red, let her think it was coincidence when my shell company bought Grandad's antique clock from her estate sale. The game wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about ownership, of properties, of companies, of every piece she'd ever taken for granted. The empire grew, and I made sure she'd have to watch. Karma didn't come for Clara in a dramatic sweep. It seeped in through the cracks she'd ignored for years. First, the zoning board suddenly remembered the lake house's non-conforming dock needed permits dating back a decade. Fines piled up like unopened bills on her marble countertops. Then, the Historical Preservation Society took sudden interest in Grandad's architecturally significant boathouse, slapping restoration requirements on every rotting beam. Her husband left quietly. No explosive fight, just a note on the fridge and half their accounts emptied. The gossip blogs feasted on photos of her leaving court hearings in sunglasses too large for her gaunt face. I knew the exact moment she realised she was drowning. A rainy Tuesday, when my assistant forwarded the email from her lawyer, Clara was seeking investors to save the estate from foreclosure. The attached financials were a masterclass in desperation. Second mortgages, maxed out credit lines, even a lien on her jewellery. My accountant made a small noise. She's leveraged to the hilt. I traced the lake house's address on my office window, watching raindrops distort the skyline. The numbers didn't lie. She'd be bankrupt by autumn. That night, I drove past the estate for the first time in years. Weeds choked the gardens, shutters hung crooked. A single light burned in the guest house where Clara now slept. The main rooms too expensive to heat. She'd chosen every step that brought her here. The forgeries, the lies, the arrogance of believing the universe would keep indulging her. I turned the car around before she could see my headlights. The foreclosure notice would arrive within weeks, and I intended to be the highest bidder. The game wasn't about brute force, it was precision. I started with whispers, not declarations. A casual remark to a city council member about questionable permits at waterfront properties. An anonymous donation to the Historical Preservation Society, earmarked for enforcement initiatives. Each move calculated, untraceable, dressed up as civic concern rather than vengeance. When the zoning inspector appeared at Clara's dock, clipboard in hand, I was already 3 steps removed. By the time the environmental review flagged unpermitted shoreline modifications, my fingerprints had evaporated like morning fog. I watched from a distance as the bureaucracy I'd nudged into motion chewed through her resources. Every appeal she filed hit new roadblocks. Every expert she hired discovered fresh complications. The estate's value plummeted on paper, sinking under the weight of violations and required repairs. My lawyer, a razor-sharp woman who asked no questions about my interest in the property, kept me updated with dry amusement. "Your sister's latest offer was rejected," she'd say, sliding across rejection letters where banks cited unacceptable risk. I let the silence stretch before responding. How unfortunate. The final touch was poetic. A small article in the local paper about neglected historic properties featuring a conspicuously unflattering photo of the lake houses peeling paint. The piece ran the same week Clara's last lender called in her loan. No one would ever connect the dots to me. That was the beauty of it. I hadn't broken any laws, hadn't uttered a single threat. The trap had been built from her own arrogance and cut corners. All I'd done was lock the door behind her. The call came on a Thursday afternoon, though I'd known it was coming for months. My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, carefully neutral. "There's a woman here to see you. She says she's your sister." I let the silence stretch just long enough before answering. "Send her in?" The woman who stepped through my office door barely resembled the Clara I remembered. The tailored confidence had frayed. Her blazer was last season's cut, her hair lacked its usual polished shine. Dark smudges lingered under her eyes, poorly concealed with drugstore concealer. She held herself too stiffly, as if her pride was the only thing keeping her upright. "Nice office," she said, her gaze skittering over the floor-to-ceiling windows, the modern art, the row of awards I hadn't earned for her benefit. A muscle twitched near her jaw. I didn't stand, didn't offer coffee, just leaned back in my chair and watched her squirm. To what do I owe the pleasure? Her fingers tightened around the strap of her purse. Real leather, but the edges were worn. "I need to talk to you about the lake house." "Ah, there it was." I steepled my fingers, saying nothing, letting the hum of the air conditioner fill the silence. Clara's composure cracked first. "The bank is foreclosing next month." Her voice hitched just slightly on the last word. "I thought, given our history, you might be interested in investing." A laugh threatened to bubble up my throat. Investing? As if this were a business proposition rather than a surrender. I turned my monitor toward her, displaying the foreclosure notice I'd already bookmarked. "You mean this?" Colour flooded her cheeks. She hadn't realised I was tracking her downfall so closely. I stood then, walking to the window where the city sprawled below us. "Why would I want that money pit?" "It's Grandad's house," she whispered. The words hung between us, weighted with everything unsaid, all the birthdays forgotten, the signatures forged, the years she'd spent pretending I didn't exist. I turned slowly. No, Clara, it was our house, until you made it yours. Her breath came faster now, panic seeping through the cracks of her carefully constructed facade. I'll sell it to you, below market value. I almost pitied her then. Almost. But the memory of that dock, of her laughter floating across the water while I stood in the shadows, hardened something inside me. I smiled. Let's talk numbers. Her relieved exhale was the sound of a woman who thought she'd just been thrown a lifeline. She didn't realise yet. I wasn't saving her, I was claiming what was always meant to be mine. The conference room smelled of lemon polish and tension. Clara perched on the edge of her chair, fingers drumming the table as my lawyer slid the offer across the glass surface. 20% of the assessed value. Her voice cracked. That's robbery. I swirled my pen between my fingers. It's generous, considering the liens. Her eyes darted to the documents outlining the back taxes, the code violations, the impending auction no other buyer would touch. A vein pulsed at her temple. You planned this, she whispered. I let the accusation hang, watching her connect the dots. The mysterious zoning complaints, the sudden preservation orders, all the invisible hands that had steered her toward this moment. My lawyer cleared her throat. The offer expires at 5. Clara's signature, when she finally scrawled it, looked nothing like the elegant flourish she'd forged years ago. It trembled, small and defeated. I tucked the papers away without looking at them. The victory wasn't in the ink. It was in her eyes when she realised the student had surpassed the master. The closing took place in the same law office where we'd signed Grandad's will years earlier. Clara arrived early for once, her nails freshly manicured but chipping at the edges, as if she'd been picking at them all morning. The banker and notary made polite small talk while we waited for the final documents to print, the hum of the laserjet the only sound in the room. When my lawyer handed Clara the cheque, she stared at it like the numbers might rearrange themselves. This is half what we agreed. I reached into my briefcase and slid a second envelope across the table. Open it. Her hand shook as she unfolded the architectural plans, detailed renderings of the lake house restored to its original glory, plus a new guest house by the water. The permit approvals were paperclipped to the back, every bureaucratic hurdle already cleared. I don't understand. The main house isn't part of our deal. I tapped the dotted line where the property boundaries had been redrawn. You're selling me the estate. I'm leasing you the guest house. $1 a year. Her breath caught. The unspoken terms hung between us. She could stay, but only as a tenant. Only on my terms. The lawyer cleared his throat. Miss Whitmore, your signature? Clara looked at me then, really looked, perhaps for the first time in our lives, seeing not the little sister she'd outmanoeuvred, but the woman who'd outplayed her at every turn. The pen hovered over the line. Outside, a woodpecker hammered at an old oak, the same rhythm as Grandad's pocket watch ticking in my jacket pocket. She signed. The moving trucks arrived at dawn. I watched from the main house's wraparound porch as workers carried Clara's belongings across the lawn, not to waiting vehicles, but to the freshly painted guest house with its cheerful blue shutters. Her Louis XIV furniture looked absurd against the cottage's cosy walls, like a peacock trapped in a canary cage. Clara stood frozen in the driveway, silk robe flapping in the morning breeze, as the realization hit. This wasn't temporary. You can't be serious. Her voice carried the razor edge of someone clinging to denial. I sipped my coffee, steam curling into the crisp air. The guest house has all the essentials, even a view of the lake. A workman passed with an armful of her designer shoes, the red soles flashing like warning lights. Clara's composure shattered. This is petty revenge. No. I set down my mug with deliberate calm. Revenge would have been letting the bank toss you out entirely. She flinched as if struck. The morning sun illuminated every fine line around her eyes, every strand of grey her stylist usually concealed. For a heartbeat, I saw not my tormentor, but a middle-aged woman who'd gambled everything and lost. Then she lifted her chin. "I'll buy it back." I smiled. "With what?" The words landed like a guillotine. As the movers carried in the last box, I turned toward the house. My house, leaving Clara standing in the driveway of her new, much smaller life. The screen door slapped shut behind me with finality. Some silences spoke louder than screams. The party lights strung across the dock shimmered like fallen stars on the water's surface. Laughter and jazz floated through the summer air as guests clinked, glasses under paper lanterns. Investors, artists, a senator who'd begged for an invitation. Everyone who mattered in this town now stood on what Clara had once called her dock, eating canapés off what she'd claimed as her antique tables. I moved through the crowd in a backless emerald gown, the kind Clara would have deemed too bold for the lake house. The dress caught the light with every step, making me look like something molten and dangerous. From the corner of my eye, I saw her. Clara hovered at the edge of the guesthouse porch, backlit by a single yellow bulb, clutching a wine glass like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She'd tried to dress for the occasion, pearls, a navy sheath, but the effect was a ghost of her former elegance. Our eyes met across the lawn. I raised my champagne flute in a slow, deliberate toast. Her grip tightened around her stemware before she vanished into the shadows. The band struck up a Cole Porter tune as I ascended the makeshift stage near the boathouse. A hush fell over the crowd. "Thank you all for celebrating with me tonight," I said, the microphone amplifying my voice across the water. "This house has been in my family for generations." A pause, the perfect beat. Now it's finally home. Applause erupted. Camera flashes popped like lightning bugs. Later, when the last guest had departed and the caterers were packing up, I walked barefoot down the dock, the wood still warm from the day's sun. The guesthouse light was off. Somewhere in the darkness, Clara was listening. Let her. I dipped my toes into the ink-black water, watching the ripples distort my reflection. The girl who'd signed those papers in a fog of grief and wine was gone. In her place stood a woman who turned every slight into leverage, every betrayal into collateral. The lake house windows blazed behind me, every room restored to Grandad's original vision, plus some modern improvements. My assistant would email Clara the noise ordinance paperwork tomorrow. I smiled at the moonlit water. The best revenge wasn't cruelty. It was living brilliantly, audaciously well, and making sure she had to watch.